All right. This one is. That's my train of thought again. So, this is about programming methods, more or less by the Dark Faction, and the reason behind that and how it connects to this rung of society, which is just an age. And so there's the idea that without a cosmic drama, without a struggle from high to low, inner to outer, ignorance to truth, without some form of refining process, the spirit, the mind stagnates, and there is only suffering and lostness. And so the idea is that there are teams of individuals who are designated players in this cosmic drama game reality show system. The Dark, their job, their designation is to cause the highest degree of suffering possible for a human being, for a physical being. The highest degree of suffering and challenge possible. So the idea is not to kill, it's not torture or maim, but it's to entangle the mind within the traps in this physical dimension, the ignorance, okay, because even ignorance and knowledge is not physical, it's energetic, conceptual. So there are these mind traps, and this often results in fracturing the conscious mind, and this connects to the celebrity cloning. That's another aspect that I want to speak on, because that is the basis for what happens with those who become assets of the overall system, to where they are utilized as gatekeepers, or, and I don't like that term, it's a not accurate term, not in the truest sense, but they become like spokespersons for the ideologies of this system, which each time is just one layer after the other inching forwards towards a more complete goal, but it's never really complete, not until the show is basically over, which at that point is a whole different system altogether. And so that's what a lot of the celebrities go through, and the majority of it is based upon, it's centralized around, it begins and ends with, it is literally like the goal, sexual depravity, and more basically that. Deception, lying, insults, swearing, defilement, defiling religion or spirituality, higher spirituality, truth. All of that is secondary to the abuse, the manipulation of the sexual energy, which is the strongest physically dominant force of energy, which is actually a bridge between the spiritual and the physical. And then you have the kind of refined version of that, which is a higher form of creativity. And so that's the basis for the control systems. And when you see these celebrities who are in public eye begin to more or less come to terms with what has happened and how they've been used or what they've been through, that's where you see changes in their demeanor. You see messages as if they're putting it plain as day out in public for all to see. And so, of course, with the slyness that is the system, part of the system then is to tell on themselves. So it's as if nothing ever changes. It's very difficult to catch. But in that same sense, you can see what they're going through and what's happening with different colors being used, different wardrobes or styles and symbolism in their media, music, acting, whatever. And so you'll see that, and it's about stress of the mind. This isn't related entirely to the stress related to travel through electrogravitic means, with temporal dilation, all types of issues that arise with that. This is related to fracturing the mind for personal use as a mind or sex slave, and for commercial use as an assassin, a spy, a sex slave, a spokesperson, or a celebrity, basically. A whole host of reasons and lists or functions. And the idea behind the soldier or the militant aspect of this is that to militarize the mind in that way after such a fracturing has occurred, they're basically, the person can be programmed to not stop at anything, and as well to completely forget about all of it. And in that sense, if they're captured as well, there's very little risk of being captured because of the training that goes in. It turns them into a robot. They won't even remember or know who they are or what happened. They could get their fingers cut off. It doesn't matter. So it's, unless that other crew knows the access codes basically into the person's mind, which is not likely. And it all became technologically centered. It used to be basically like another person talking about this. I'm not going to throw their name out here now because of the subject of this, but it used to be beating the shit out of a person until they turned into like a baby, basically, and their mind began to shut off. And then there's like all these games and rituals and programming. It's like a Halloween show on acid, like literally. And with like these like iboga or other chemicals that are like ketamine or something that's like completely disable a person. It's like literally horrific. But it's creative. It's genuinely creative, ingenious. I think that's what I was looking for. Because the way that they come up with ways to access your mind, it'll be stuff you didn't even realize you were afraid of, that you were holding back. But they'll have profiled the responses, the hits on certain words or phrases, and that's what's happening en masse with the media and the social mind, the collective mind. Right now, the collective mind is unaware. I'm just going to throw that in there. If it's self-aware, none of this works. People don't run around like a herd of animals in a crowd and fight at the drop of a pin or a hat. And it's drop of a hat, not a drop of a pin. And because that's animal, whatever you want to call it. That's how animals operate. And the whole point, though, the point of this is that the goal is to get to self-awareness. It's to get to the collective mind awakening. I have my discrepancies. I'm getting deja vu again from when I first began to talk about this. And I first began to talk about this. And then I first began to tell you that's what's going on in my head. Because saying, there are discrepancies about believing in the process and this, that, and the other, and who's really being honest. It's tricky, but the idea is that this is for the collective mind, to awaken the collective mind, in that until that occurs, people really can't complain because there's nobody there to complain, which is horrific. And, I'm not going to fully say I agree with that, but I do know what it refers to with basically a sleeper, a person who's just turned off. It's not that they're a complete ass or they're horrifically mean. It's literally like they're a robot. There's nobody there. And then this relates to this hybridization projects and basically this mass enslavement through these frequencies. So the idea here is that with these frequencies, a person's mind can be mind-linked, synchronized to a person manning what is a psychotronic weapon system, scalar system. I can't remember, there's a specific word for it. It's basically a beam system technology that triangulates the person and sends vibrations into their field, which is when they're hit with I think it's like something to cause a standing wave. Something hits their skull first and it causes like a silent resonation. You hear like the high pitched or whatever. Okay, that puts out a standing wave. Then that wave can be vibrated with two other beams that go in and cause a secondary, or in this case actually a third wave, or trinary, because it's yours, the other one, and then now these additional ones. And that whatever that third one is, or that secondary one, is what your brain will slowly snap to. It'll become altered and modified towards. So if you know about that, okay, you got a standing chance. If you have no idea, then they're going to be fighting and having all these desires and this crazy stuff, and just their mind shut off, not being able to think and have critical thought. That's what's happening. That's what's being used. When it's very, very high, what we have seen is literally a person sitting there, and then it's as if they're possessed by somebody else. And there's, another reality, a spiritual reality, which you would call symbolic, energetic consciousness beings, entities from the spiritual realm. This is not that. This is literally a guy manning a machine, a device that jumps into someone else's body and gets them to do whatever they want. And so the point is that the guise is that this is for the betterment of humanity, and that ultimately, without a struggle, there would be no motion, and we would have stagnated and fizzled out long ago. Which is basically, you either become immortal gods, or light gods, or return to God, the creator, not the lord shit being who beats the crap out of people that he doesn't like, because that's a demiurge. And, you know, it's just you gotta look into it, basically. Because there's one of love and there's one of jealousy and anger. And so, we either advance or we fizzle out. There's no in-between. Time is the in-between. And history has run its course time and time again. And so, apparently, though, what happened is that we came from an immortal state into this place with the concept that we would have to explore something we didn't explore before in order to solidify humanity, who we are here, back into eternity, back into the Godhead, if you could use that term, but that's an outdated cultic term, which could refer to some of these other interpretations. But the idea is that that's where this began, but from there it kind of spiraled out of control, and like I said in another video, it all goes down to whether people are attaining what they want in life, and it worked. Now we got it all out of our system, in the same sense we became who we meant to be, and whether or people don't. But the idea is that the methods that are used are literally to infiltrate the person's energetic field, their mind, using technology and the mind of another individual, and to more or less infiltrate them and get them to participate in what could be seen as rituals, and ritual abuse, and promiscuity, and in some cases murder, assassination, all types of stuff. And that's what you see with the celebrities and the celebrity cloning. And yeah, it stresses them a lot. But all we can really do is more or less make use of the information. So it's understood that basically people are knowing, but as well the dark faction, their goal is to stress the person until they can overcome it, or they just give up, period. It's not whether they can overcome it and then they don't give up, or they don't give up. Because it kind of is, because if they wanted people to just not have anything to do with it, they would just kill everybody. It's obvious. It's not. It's a torture. To put it in simple layman terms, which is kind of derogatory, it's a torture game for them. It's not, the goal is not to kill, it's not to completely disable, although the result of torturing or increasing the stress beyond somebody's limitations is basically disabling them. So that's the result. So it's kind of like an accidental system where they intend to overwhelm the individual without actually trying to overwhelm them or kill them, and while still aiming towards, or at least operating under the guise of, bettering the humanity by inducing strength bringing practices. But it becomes 100% an inversion of all the natural essences, to the point where everything is reversed and the mind is flipped upside down and turned inside out. And this more or less exposes the mind, where everything that was inner and, you know, like sacred, becomes the outer, raggedy, like outer part of it, made to be embraced by the world, and all what is normally like the outer, you know, not meaningless stuff, but the less centralized stuff, then goes to the core, and the person's basically flipped inside out. And this confuses the entire psychology of the individual and introduces basically altered states. That's what it's about. It's about tripping the person out in whatever way that can be managed and then utilized and repeated as if it's a scientific process of taking over a person's mind, which is what it is. That's what's happening in mass. That's what's happening. We're getting out of the era of these experimentations with the bases, but as well, these experimentations simply went overt and covert at the same time, to the point where they're so well developed and the technology is so advanced that the same thing is being done, the same results are being met, but it's so invisible, people don't even know that it's happening. When before they had to beat the crap out of people, drug them, kill them, bring them back to life, kill them again, bring them back to life. And, and the mind's going to fracture if that happens. And apparently if they do that enough times, this is where it gets weird. Something happens where the person comes back and they have full memory recall of Earth. That there's a creation of Earth, there's higher beings, there's lower beings. Basically, they come back, they go to heaven and hell and come back with the memory of everything. And they've met the Creator, they've met it all, they've seen it all. So there's like some crazy immortality, the knowledge of everything and all that is thing or reaction that happens when a person goes through certain processes basically all the way. So it's almost like that's the success. It's just that it fails all the time because not everybody can go through that. So it's like it goes from, who's a monster to who's a scientist to who's really trying to help because we're in this trap system and where all our truth and all our past is hidden from us by the way the system works. It's very confusing. There's layers. It's like an onion. That's how it's designed. And it's all cryptographically encoded. It's just like layers of mystery, riddle, different languages used. It's all encrypted. That's the basis for all of it. Because the information of the mind it's all symbols, it's all metaphors. That's how your subconscious works. It's all like dreams. It's like everybody's dreaming. It's like they're accessing the dreams. The last part of this is a method that is used when a person gets placed into a state of fear, a vibration of fear, where they're very, very low in awareness and emotion or feeling. Excuse me. They are at the level of trauma that was present when they were born. The person has a near-death experience automatically. They begin to receive messages, images of the other side. They basically, I've seen it, you see your family, your ancestors. This is apparently tapping into the genetic aspect of the DNA and the consciousness. It's actually the unconscious mind because we don't have access to this information casually. And at that point, they're in a super conscious state, but it is very strange and foreign, alien. Well, it's not alien, it's just spiritual to this realm. It's extra telestial. And so basically, at that point, they can move in and program. They can put in any information, any programming, desires or fears or whatever it is that they want. And what that does is when the person dies, and this is weird because apparently people only die if this system basically overwhelms them because they invented death through this system. They're literally the bringers of death, the harbingers of death. I don't know if I said that right, but like literally they're the Grim Reaper. They invented a role for somebody who would do that because people don't naturally die. The strangest thing. And it's all being mapped out by the system, which is in function like a big organic biotechnical computer system, which responds with the body as if it's the same. They also said another group created the body, another group created the soul, I mean the land and the what's it called, the moon, and things like that. Supercomputer systems. And atmosphere. UFO craft or whatever. And the soul is still an aspect of this matrix. But the idea is that when that programming is put in input, the person dies and they have not gone back to that to heal that level of programming, they will vibrate on a frequency relative to what symbols and essences were inputted by the programming, and these match the frequencies of the devices that are activated like soul catching nets, and it's a way of ensnaring a person's soul. One explanation is that they do that because we're all already within a soul net. That's whoever put this place here and built this and basically stole it from the original version, put a soul net there, and that their soul net is the one that whoever gets in it is saved from the BS recycling crap, because then you can basically get away from that. It's one explanation. But that is accessing the genetic memory and inputting their code, frequency harmonics, which is what the DNA is, and becoming part of you and merging into their collective. It's the strangest thing, but that's how they do it. And that's happening to the masses with terror attacks and false flags, and it's all a show, but with people in such a state of terror-induced fight or flight fear, they can access their minds and input themselves and literally hybridize them spiritually so that their souls merge and they basically siphon energy from people, and these are just people doing this. They're very, very, very intelligent people. They enhance their intelligence to the point where they're no longer classified as humans, because it doesn't, it needs a classification at that point, a new classification, if these types of capabilities all of a sudden come around and no being in this plane ever does anything like that. And so they call themselves demigods or gods. And, man, I'm tired. Oh, sorry, I just gleeked. I don't know where it went. That's a good way to end the video. So there's a kid that would do that in school. He would gleek on people across the classroom. That's weird. So I spit shit out the tongue. Saliva, actually. And so, yeah, that's like the programming. That's one of the programming methods. It sounds basic, but then imagine, 1,000 different people, imagine 400,000 different people. What different spooky mask you're going to have to come up with, and then imagine chemicals, then imagine sounds, harmonics, light, frequencies, out-of-body experiences, other beings, hybrid beings, full body suits, simulated environments. It gets weird. And that's the point, that's what the celebrities go through, and they are, they're in pain a lot because their memories are separated. And when the memories come back, that's when there is a stress. It's just like a stress fracture. And so that is to be avoided. And everything has to be towards healing now, because your overall goal is to awaken humanity, because without the struggle, it is said that basically people, if you're an immortal species and there's nothing to do, everyone goes insane. That's how it works. But as well, we're not supposed to be here where there would be natural struggles. But again, we are here now. Sorry. So everything has to be amped up to a certain degree. As part of the story, the other end of it is that our bodies were designed by these beings who use technology to steal the soul by stealing the genetic harmonic frequencies, the code, and inputting that into bodies, cloned bodies, which are called human vessels. That they literally mapped all this stuff out and used devices to do that and planted everyone on the planet. And when they went back with a temporal viewing to see the origins of humanity, the beginnings of the universe, what happened, they saw some goobers planted humans there like a people farm, which is weird. And there is a higher, most high. That's the whole point, that we all have to awaken because it's within. Alright, I'm going to end this account that I yawned like 3 or 4 times. There's so much more to say, but a lot of it is color-coded. Just try and look into that as far as the celebrity cloning. You don't have to sit there and think about traumatization, although managing trauma, healing trauma, confronting it is the undoing of that process and the strengthening of the person, because that process takes away the power of the individual. It works like this. This is kind of the wrap-up to it all. When that trauma is there, a person goes into a mode of destabilized awareness. In that system, there will be periods of awakening and periods of forgetfulness. In the periods of forgetfulness, there will be a loss of power where they'll feel the need to do things, whether it's like these panic attacks or OCD motions or depraved actions or violence or outbursts, whatever it is, schizophrenic breaks, psychotic episodes, bipolar disorder episodes. That's basically what happens, and then they return to normal. The more that happens, the more that person has to have an episode in order to come back to baseline and feel okay. The goal of history of society, of civilization, is to see how we're going from high to low consistently, like this big binary, wave pattern, which is not very, gotta breathe, so I'm going to yawn again, which is not very, brave shoulder, looks good. It's not very efficient for a non-dual method of awareness where we are capable of comprehending beyond the ego. And when the ego is in that, it's full of suffering because it fears, it believes it. Every time it's up, it's like, oh, I'm this forever. That's the thing. It goes down, it's like, oh, I'm going to be down forever. And it just forgets. It's an illusion. It's a maximum of the illusion. That's what it is, that this realm as an illusion, the perception, which I mentioned in the previous video, is maximized when that trauma is there. When you have that kind of dichotomy of being that bipolar, bioptic, split brain, higher and lower, left and right system where everything is kind of at an odds. That's the pendulum. It's also time. But the idea is that the solution is somehow getting it to do what it does and then bringing it back to a steady baseline while retaining that awareness. Because if we do it without retaining and learning what that is and taking back our power, then we're just going to fizzle out. That's what it is. It just drops off. If we take back our power, then it's held within that, and if it's done properly, apparently that works for an eternity. And that's it. That we are self-aware for an eternity, and nothing can stop that from there on out, which is the goal, to bring about, throughout all this turmoil and suffering, to bring about an eternal race. So yeah, which is through the transcending, or more so the collapsing back down, or the harmonizing of this flip-flop polarity between the conscious, subconscious mind, which is, I can go on and on for that about the duality of the conscious mind and the transcendence of the subconscious, how the subconscious is kind of like a collective. It would have fuzzy edges and be based upon like fuzzy logic and a different number set, where the conscious mind is linear and projected and illusory in that sense of mechanism behind the neurochemistry of the brain, as it's a kind of collective all or nothing, but as well a cloud kind of computing presence. But that the way our consciousness works, we can only focus on one thing at a time. It's kind of like this interplay between what it is and what it isn't, like these dualized forces of being. When we merge into a kind of congruent pattern within that, and we're harmonized and we have it in our power to be that way, we don't have to have forgetfulness and wakefulness. Even they say sleep and death don't exist once we harmonize, because it's all energy at that point. And once the society begins to do that, we have a collective mind that awakens. Now we're in a crowd and somebody yells, "Hey, fight!" You know, stupid faces. Now everybody starts fighting. If we have a collective self-awareness, everybody goes, "Do you know who that is?" I don't know. And they all think, and they're thinking. They're not just reacting like animals. It's the craziest thing. Imagine seeing a civilization that does that. It's wild. Because here, everybody's just like, "Dude, what do we do?" And they just run and start throwing stuff. It's like, why would you do that? There's no mind. It's crazy. But when that happens and people begin to wake up, the realm itself is tuned into those frequencies and it begins to change. And that's the big shift of the ages and all that. And it's as simple as that, although the trauma stands in the way. And it's like a simple game. But the challenge is spreading that information, that knowledge, and literally seeping it in like a big brain trying to like wake up and get all the nutrient distributed out through everything. That's just some of the topics, some of the ideas that I haven't talked about recently, needs to be talked about. And I know others aren't really mentioning, and I don't want people to forget, because you're going to see it sooner or later. And chances are you're already thinking now, you don't know it. It's in the back of your mind. You haven't really faced yourself yet. Now, most people watch this, you know, in the comments, things like that. You guys are pretty aware. Thank you. Thank you for the comments and all that stuff. I'll try to get through to a lot of the comments when I get around to it, because I've stopped stopping for a lot of things. It's a double anyway, which isn't personal, but things are accelerating and decisions are going to have to be made, or choices are going to have to be made. Instead of a decision where you're being forced to pick between one and the other, it's like it's decisive. You're slicing. It is a choice where you're picking out of a radiant option of where you're going to go, and it's your self-awareness that's going to result from that. That's where we're coming to. Others are going to see just their choice of one door to the other door. If you're you're choosing self-awareness, it'll look like a radiant degree of angles, and any one that you choose, as long as you're choosing it, is the one. So yeah, all right. Thank you.